And we are ready to go. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Let's see.
We should probably let the viewers know that we are doing this because we both decided to go camping together this weekend and forgot to record before we left. So That's why we're here.
The 6.5 minute mark is probably where you're going to want to cut. Just cut off that first bit. Just for you. That's just for you, baby. Baby
Please
girl.
Don't call me baby. I will hang up on this call.
I just watched the episode of the Halloween episode. I want to say it's in season 12 of Bob's Burgers, where Jane is like, I'm going to kiss you on the mouth, Dad. Give me those lips. And he goes, Jane.
I was just watching that episode as well while I was folding laundry. All right, folks, we're going to get into it here today. We're going to start off. We're going to get right into it and make sure you guys blow up the Twitch chat. We're happy to have you guys here today on our live recording. Having been pushed back from Terra and back into the Eye of Terror, the Thousand Sons begin to experience a massive onslaught of the flesh change. Tzeentch has its claws dug into the remainder of the Legion. Magnus fully succumbs to the warp, and the Legion begins a new chapter of its history. Let's take a deep dive into the units of the Thousand Sons and their appearance in Space Marine 2, the tabletop, and the lore.
Welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
And we are twin brothers here to bring you what's new in nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects, in this case, Warhammer 40,000. Welcome to our cantina, grab a drink, and settle in as we set course for realities beyond our own.
Cheers, brother. I have a little bit of adult root beer with me today, so it's a fantastic time.
Is that the not your father's root beer?
No, it's root beer mixed with whiskey.
Nice.
So, to start off the day, guys, our starter question and question of the day for our Twitch chat is, what is your favorite Warhammer trope/stereotype? Warhammer is full of hilarious simplifications, and we want to hear your favorite. For example, the Tau are fish people. All interpretations are welcome. We need a crash course in 40k stereotypes, watch Flash skits, video Warhammer 40k, Looney Tunes edition. It is a gem of a video.
I watch it so often. It just makes me laugh. Just legitimate gut-bursting laughter. Especially when the little corn berserker goes over to the guardsman and just puts a little sticker on his helmet. So cute.
It's very good. It's very good. Andrew, why don't you start off with yours?
Oh my gosh. So I wrote down 3 because I didn't know what you were going to say, but I'm going to pick my favorite out of these 3. My favorite 40k stereotype is that the Blood Ravens are kleptomaniacs.
Love that.
For those of you who don't know, the Blood Ravens are a chapter of Space Marines who we don't know their origin. They actually could be a Thousand Sons origin or progenitor chapter. I don't really know what you would call them.
Yeah, would you call them a successor chapter? Because they, I guess, yes, technically they were a successor chapter because that's who came before them.
Yes.
But it's there's a little bit of a gray area in there because I wouldn't want everybody knowing that my dad was Magnus. So,
yeah, I actually don't think that the Blood Ravens came from the Thousand Sons because then they would have to deal with the flesh change, and there seems to be no trace of it in their chapter. But they really like stealing stuff, and it's really, really funny. They'll like go around to other allies in chapters in other parts of the Imperium, and they'll just be like, awesome, this super valuable like archaeological relic or thing that is like 10,000 to 15,000 years old, we're just going to take it. It's ours now.
This is mine now.
Finders, keepers, losers can suck it.
I do like that. I think one of my favorite ones is that, not that the Tower fish people, but the Tower communists. That's always a good one. That one gets me to crack up quite a bit because it's everything they do is like their tagline is for the greater good. So everyone kind of was like, yeah, they're just space communists. I think another one that I really enjoy is that the Adeptus Mechanicus is like horny for machines. I think
they
that's
are
like one of my favorites.
So gross. Oh gosh, the flesh is weak. That's why we made this motor.
And I've lost my appetite.
Demonetized. Anyway,
I don't have anything safe for work to say about the Adeptus Sororitas, so I'll leave that one alone. You guys can comment that as you will. I do like yours, one of your notes that says orcs are a psychic fungus. I think that's hilarious. But when I'm describing the orcs, I like to describe them as they run on the power of imagination. Because the
little SpongeBob meme with the rainbow. Imagination.
And each color in the rainbow is a different part of why the orcs get cool stuff.
They're like, we really enjoy our primary colors, so much so that we've imbued them with special powers. Gosh, the orcs are so weird. Although, speaking of sentient fungus, I'm rewatching The Last of Us. Oh. Guys, if you haven't watched The Last of Us and you want to be sad, go be sad there.
100%.
Ooh, let's see. Ads are about to go start on our Twitch. Do we want to kind of dick around while those are going? Or do we want to just keep talking?
Let's just keep going.
Cool. We're going to get right into it. We're going to be talking about the Thousand Sons, and we're going to be talking about kind of the bulk of their legion. We're not talking about Magnus, we're not talking about Ahriman, and we're not talking about kind of their role in the Horus Heresy. We're talking about kind of their unit composition as an army, as a legion, as a cult of magicians. The sorceress members of Magnus's legion derive their visual style from ancient Egypt. If you guys didn't pick that up, most of the Marines sport a headdress similar to the nemes worn by long-departed pharaohs. You can kind of see in, if you've ever seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, the headdress kind of goes down over their shoulders. The only difference between the Thousand Sons is theirs goes up. That's pretty much the only difference, but they're identical.
Quick side note, what if the Thousand Sons marched into battle with a 40K equivalent to Let My People Go from Prince of Egypt, and they just had it, just change the words, but keep the tune, and that's their battle march? Oh,
that'd be so good. There's an artist I really enjoy. He's on YouTube and Spotify. His name is Samuel Kim, and he does these epic versions of a bunch of different movies, and he does a couple of the songs from The Prince of Egypt, and they are phenomenal. I regularly listen to them. They're so good. Oh, just chill bumps every single time.
Absolutely. If you guys are just hopping into the chat, by the way, we are talking about the Thousand Sons today.
Oh, yeah, our chat. Welcome, guys. Nice to see you. Let's see. The parallels to humanity's ancestors from ancient Egypt, it's really not subtle, and it's a little on the nose from their polytheistic mysticism, which influenced this legion to have a much higher number of psychers per capita than any other legion. Like what we've said in a previous episode, the Thousand Sons actually created the Librarius, which is just the house of psychers inside each individual legion and chapter. Their world of Prospero was a sanctuary of knowledge similar to the Library of Alexandria, and the most obvious parallelism found in their architecture. The fictional city of Tizca resembles a future version of Egypt, where some of their largest buildings are, you guessed it, pyramids. The slight difference is that the pyramids we have in real life are used as landing sites for the Goa'uld and not as actual building. It's just common knowledge.
There you go. That's a deep cut for anybody who gets it.
It's like, man, if you understood that, you need some Advil because your back probably hurts. Because you slept on it weird, and now it's really bothering you. Strike Master Ice really appreciated that Stargate reference. Let's go! Yes!
And the calm brew. Free.
Apparently SG1 is what gets the people going.
Hilarious.
Amanda Carpenter can get it.
100%. Just so you guys know, a lot of what we pull our information from today is 2 books and a lot of sources from the wiki. Mm-hmm. So there's the 40K wiki, the Lexicanium wiki, and then the novel A Thousand Sons by Graham McNeil and Prospero Burns by Dan Abnett. Both really, really fun authors that are just fantastic. Dude, I cannot read today. That's fine. So having a good time with that. So
Good that you have them on audiobook. You're like, what's happening? I can't.
Exactly. One thing that is covered quite extensively in the audiobooks is that the Thousand Sons is kind of split up into 5 different cults. And they're not cults like, hey, we worship different things, even though they do, they just don't realize it.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of worshiping different aspects of the warp, or they're communing with, demons and stuff to get their powers. But they don't like realize it. Like they're like, oh, we're swimming in the great ocean, which is what they call the warp, not like kind of realizing that they're basically sharing it with their demonic inhabitants. So there's 5 cults. We're not going to go into those crazy deep today because they do get kind of convoluted and they lose their significance after the Horus Heresy.
Correct.
So just keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. There is the Athenians, who are telepaths. You guys know what telepathy is. There is the Corvidae, which is the sign of the raven. Or I should say the Athenians is the sign of the eye. Corvidae, which is the sign of the raven, is precognition, so being able to see into the future. There is the Raptora, which is like the sign of the raptor. These are telekines. These are basically really important for actually shielding the city of Tisca when they got bombarded by the space wolves. So that was super fun, but they ultimately failed because Magnus was not helping. So that was a good time.
Very tragic. So sad. Sorry.
So sad. There is also the Pavoni, who are physiokinesis. They have the power of physiokinesis, so body change. And their symbol is the feather. I don't understand that connection, but that is what it is.
Yeah, I didn't get that one either. They're like, that has to be like the ugly stepsister of the 5 different cults. They're like, look at these awesome powers. It's like, what about these guys? Not so much.
Now, see, the interesting thing is the Pavoni actually do become more adept at fighting other humans because they're like, hey, we're actually super in tune with human anatomy and we know how to break it really easily. So it did make them effective against human enemies, which didn't become necessary until they were traitors. So
this is true.
The last cult of the Thousand Sons is the Pyre, whose symbol is a phoenix because everything they do has to deal with fire. These are pyrokines. These are basically just your classic firebenders, so nothing really else to explain there. They can whoosh and like shoot fire out of their fingertips and penis and stuff.
What'd you say?
What? What are you?
One really cool aspect of the Pyre, or the Pyre, however you pronounce it, is they can actually use their abilities to take control of machines as well. So in the defense of the city of Tisca and during the assault on Prospero, the head, the captain, I guess they don't really call them captains. I don't remember what they call them. But the captain of the Pyre cult, he takes control of a titan in the city of Tisca that literally the Thousand Sons were using as decoration. It hadn't moved in centuries, and they're like, okay, now it's time to defend our home planet. And they use these like basically crystals and stuff that they implant inside of machines, and then they power through the warp so that they can control them. It's awesome. So he literally controls a Titan with his mind remotely. Bluetooth Titan.
That's pretty crazy.
It's so cool. He does die.
Yes, because that amount of psychic might is basically links your fate to whatever happens to the Titan. So
yes.
It's a really fun and epic moment in the books, guys. You should highly recommend it.
Oh, it's so good. Once the K-Sons get their collective butts kicked by the wolves and then teleported to the planet of the sorcerers by Tzeentch, each of the sorcerers basically gained all of the powers of the different cults. So congrats, your legion has been shattered. Your homeworld has been burned. You have been spurned by the Emperor that you have spent potentially centuries serving. And now he hates you. But at least you leveled up.
Oh, cool. You gained some knowledge.
You gained some experience points through trauma.
So,
let's just literally just D&D.
Yeah. One thing I would like to kind of amend. In our last episode, we talked a little bit about the struggle of what was going to happen to Magnus and the Legion at the end of the heresy, because eventually they were like, hey, we're kind of building this whole like anti-psi machine that means we can use the Eldar's webway instead of the warp to go places, and therefore we won't need psychers anymore. That was the eventual plan. Now, this means And I actually
Question.
read up on this a little bit. Yes, go ahead.
That is the original intention of the Golden Throne, correct? Is to be this anti-psi machine.
Yes, essentially, the Golden Throne was to power the Astronomicon and basically keep the webway open. However, after some additional reading, I found out that it actually was not the Emperor's place to take because he wanted to still rule. He wanted Magnus to sit on the Golden Throne. That was eventually his fate, was to be basically the Golden Battery. However, this was theoretically a trade-off. Now, I'll tell you why it's a trade-off, because the Golden Throne only occupies one. So the rest of the Legion would have eventually had to have been purged. That's just what would have happened. But being stuck on the Golden Throne forever means that Magnus basically would have been able to commune in the warp for eternity, which would have been a blessing for him. So the Emperor could still use the warp. He would still be able to go in, but Magnus is stuck on the toilet forever.
But I don't necessarily think that would have been a blessing for Magnus, because a lot of what he did and the sacrifices he made, and literally the sacrifices he made with his body, which is why he's missing an eye. He made a deal with the devil, lost his eye, and basically convinced Tzeentch to hold off the flesh change. He's doing it for the good of his Legion. He actually loves his sons, unlike the Emperor, who is actually the biggest douchebag in the whole universe.
Well, and that's ultimately the turning point. The Emperor is basically using this as a bargaining chip. He's like, hey, you could have all the psychic knowledge and power that you want in the world. However, you have to trade your Legion for it. And he was like, absolutely not. Yeah. And this is essentially when he was like, you know what, if you're not going to give me what I want, I'm going to fully give myself to the powers of chaos. And that's actually when Magnus turned Demon Primarch.
Gotcha.
After the Siege of Terra, and after speaking with his father.
That is so tragic.
Yeah, in my opinion, the story of Magnus is one of the most tragic among all of the fallen sons.
I mean, honest to goodness, I have a hard time thinking of a Primarch that had a worse time other than Magnus. And sure, he definitely had his share of hubris and pride and flying too close to the metaphorical psychic sun.
Yes.
But some of that is not his fault. For example, when he communes from Prospero, this is after we're totally getting into part 3, but when he communes from Prospero to Terra after the Council of Nicaea, and basically shatters all through the warp defenses, basically assaults the palace unknowingly with this ritual that he finds to warn the Emperor of Horus's treachery, mind you. The Emperor is like, dude, why did you do that? And it's almost like sitcom logic. It's like, dude, you could have prevented this, Emperor. Mm. You could have just told him, being like, hey man, I have bigger plans than this. Just chill a little bit. But like you said earlier, the Emperor's a douchebag because he just wants to turn Magnus into a living battery. That's why he only created one super powerful psyker.
Yeah.
The Emperor is not good.
Powers themselves.
Yeah, the Emperor is not a good person. He's very bad.
Very bad indeed.
It's very bad. At least it's not vodka. And I am not Russian.
Anyways, we do know that there's quite a few known war bands from the Thousand Sons. Now, keep in mind, guys, these war bands are probably not the strength of full chapters. And the reason is at the end, yeah. What?
For the people who might be listening, what is a war band? I'm asking you. No, you're talking.
So, the Space Marines have chapters, right? They're broken up into sections of 1,000 warriors, and they're basically hey, you're going to give a homeworld, you're going to get a small fleet to use, lots of tanks and stuff you can shoot stuff up with, whereas Chaos doesn't really have home planets. They are more migratory. They are more raiders than anything else. So like warbands of chaos is essentially saying like, hey, these are smaller formations of Thousand Sons and Chaos troops, but they're not quite chapters. They don't have that same organizational level and probably not the numbers either. And if you're looking at other legions, maybe, because other legions had a lot of survivors. The surviving number of Rubik Marines, or I guess total number of Thousand Sons by the end of the Horus Heresy, was like less than 10,000. So having all of these warbands, even if they were divided equally, there's not a lot left over for everybody.
Well, that's not terrible either, because I think their number after the Battle of Prospero was like 1,200.
It was very close to 1,000, foreshadowing included.
Awkward.
But because the Legion wasn't all located on Prospero, they continued to rally their forces across the Imperium back to the planet of sorcerers and with the fleets of Horus, so they did have more when they assaulted Terra.
Gotcha.
Known warbands that we've got up in our notes here, guys, are the Blades of Magnus, Brotherhood of Dust, Brothers of Retaliation, Crimson Sons, the Crystal Harbingers, Grand Order of Hermetic Blades, nerds, Kindled Spirits, Mind Eaters, Prodigal Sons, the Prism of Fate, the Reflected Ones, Sect of the Red Echo, the Secti Prosperine, the Silver Sons, Sixth Cursed, Thralls of Magnus, the Tizkin Host, Warband of Sektoth, and Warpgeists. So quite a few.
If I'm going to pick any favorite out of those, knowing absolutely nothing about these individual warbands, Brotherhood of Dust. They're just taking their new state of life and they're just owning it. They're just owning it.
That's true.
I'm in my dust era.
We got like 3 sorcerers, and the rest of these guys are all made of dust, which actually brings us very nicely into the Rubric Marines, which is going to be the first unit we're going to talk about today. So this is one of the main units that you are going to be fighting against in Space Marine 2, and is kind of the quintessential legionary, of foot soldier, essentially, of the Thousand Sons. The Rubric of Ahriman turned the rank and file of the Thousand Sons into automatons. I think we had covered that in our last episode.
It's going to come up more than once.
Basically what happened is the flesh cannot change anymore if there is no more flesh. As we mentioned last week, the Rubric basically... I shouldn't say last week. As we mentioned in our last Thousand Sons episode, the Rubric basically turned the Marines into sand-filled sets of armors held together by warp magic. The Rubric Marines, aka Rubricae, as they're often referred to inside the Legion, which come in squads of 10 on the tabletop, by the way, are usually led by a sorcerer. So you have a sorcerer and then 9 or 10 Rubricae. They are simple weapons to be used by the remaining wizards that survive the Rubric. The standard Marines are cursed forever to only exist inside their suits of armor. It is a point of contention still of how much of the minds and souls of these Marines remain within their armor, if any at all. So just keep that in mind. Because the armor is basically welted shut by magic, it takes a greater amount of punishment to rupture the armor enough to release the spirit within, vanquishing each foe. So these guys can get slapped around quite a bit, and it's basically you have to wound the torso or the head to remove the sparkly dust inside.
Which is a great kill animation in Space Marine 2 when you rip their heads off, and it's just a pressurized fountain of glitter and dust.
It's fantastic.
That dust, if you're a regular human, definitely is going to give you some sort of disease. If you have come into contact with the dust of the Thousand Sons and have suffered from mesothelioma, you may be you may be liable for compensation.
Oh gosh. If that doesn't bring back a bunch of commercials from the early 2000s every time we were sick and I had to watch a mesothelioma commercial, wild.
It's like, do I have mesothelioma? No, you've never worked a day in your life. Oh, okay.
In Space Marine 2, you'll notice that the executions often include Titus tearing the head off the automatons, causing a spout of sparks, the essence being freed from the body. This plays out on the tabletop as the Rubricae failing their 5-up invuln save, essentially. What also happens is because these are magic robots, Zinch has basically imbued these suits of armor with an extra deflection aura, a protective aura, which actually is why they have a 5-up invuln on the tabletop, and other Marines do not, which is crazy. So basically, when these Rubricae fail their save and they take wounds enough to kill, they are now just a Roman candle waiting to happen.
Yep.
Get wrecked, noobs. JK, the Space Marines are garbage in the meta right now. Thousand Suns actually sound like a really fun army to play.
Yeah, reading through some of their data sheets, I'm like, this sounds a lot more fun than the Space Marines. Dude, I'm just going to go off just a little bit. The Space Marines,
King.
The Space Marines are such trash in the meta right now, dude. They're terrible. They're like, they're at what? The second worst from the last, who's the guy on YouTube that puts out the really informative videos? Auspex Tactics. That's the guy. Yep. He put them real low, and I was like, my heart, but I have so many.
You don't anymore, though.
I don't. I traded a lot of them in for Imperial Knights. I should say a single Imperial Knight. It's very big. It is very stompy, and I am painting it in a very Zinchian way. It's gonna be really cool. It's gonna be so good.
I love the armor style you're going with on this new guide. It's very cool.
Pro tip: makeup glitter.
I was gonna say, if you say airbrush, I'm gonna throw something through the screen at you.
No, I have not used a single airbrush on any of my knights yet.
There it is.
It's gonna happen. They are
gonna get that object source lighting, baby.
OSL.
All right, Andrew, take us into our next unit type.
All right, so if we've talked about the Rubricade, those are basically the rank and file sorcerers, the meat and potatoes, I would say, of the Thousand Suns Legion. Now we're going to talk about the elite, the Scarab Occult Terminators. Excuse me. Imagine the ranged powers of the Thousand Suns combined with tactical dreadnought armor. The Scarab Occult Terminators tended to belong to the Sekhmet, which is what they used to be called, the group of veteran legionnaires clad in Tartarus pattern armor. Each Terminator bore a slash on the right eye lens of their helmets, obscuring the vision in that eye in honor of their Primarch. Which, by the way, Magnus did not tell them to do that.
No.
He also didn't tell them to remove it, but he also didn't tell them to add it. Just goes to show the level of devotion that Space Marines show to their Primarchs. They're basically enthralled to their Primarchs.
Yes.
They have such... wow, I'm really trying to explain how much charismatic power a Primarch has over a Space Marine and not use the word Riz. Real difficult. Real difficult. But most of the Primarchs have this, like, ingrained, almost like glamour, I would call it. Like, in Dungeons and Dragons, you would call it glamour. The ability to enchant people almost, to do your bidding. Like, most Space Marines, like, in the books, it talks about them being under, like, a physical weight when they see a Space Marine. They're like, I must bow before this being.
Yeah.
Bunch of suck-ups is what that is. Anyway, the Scarab Occult fought as single units, forming hulking lines of armor, pouring fire from storm bolters until the distance closed. Then these tanks would brandish their power axes or their prospering khopesh. That's those super dope-ass curved swords. They are super cool, and they would begin to hack/carve and behead their way through the enemies of the Emperor and eventually Imperial forces too, once they realized that the Emperor had no good intentions towards them. Basically from the beginning, like, literally the Emperor, like, the Emperor was strong enough to prevent the flesh change and didn't do a thing about it. He didn't care.
He could have fixed it.
He was like, listen, I already eradicated 2 of my legions for reasons I'm not going to tell y'all. Losing another one is not a big deal to me. The only person I care about in the Thousand Suns is Magnus. He's my battery boy, and I'm going to plug him in and spend him for eternity so that humanity can project their manifest destiny all over the place. Gross. I lost my spot. Okay. After the advent of the rubric, these scarab occult terminators also succumbed to Tzeentch and the dust in the and became dust in the metaphorical wind. The sorcerers of the Cabals led these warriors into battle. Surprised, the 1% survives the disaster and leaves the commoners to face the brunt of it. Weird. Anyways, the Scarab Occult manifest themselves as formidable enemies in Space Marine 2 and can be deadly in close combat and really chip away at your armor at a distance as well. Regardless, their heads come off just the same. On the tabletop, they can come in squads of 5 or 10. If you buy them in a box, they come in 5. And have a handful of ranged weapons along with stratagems from Tzeentch to make the shooting phase a little bit more lethal. Nathan, we're going to play a game. How much does a box of 5 Sekhmet Terminators, Scarab Occult Terminators cost?
Wow, I really don't like this game. A set of 5 is $50.
Higher.
No, 60.
It is $62.50.
That's wild.
On the Warhammer website, last time I checked.
That's wild.
That's a lot. Their prices keep going up every single time I check. I'm like, that's disgusting. Let's see. Combrew over in the Twitch chat says, not to mention the K-Suns were involved in at least one of these eradications, and Magnus remembered the Lost Brothers. God, I really want to know who they were. Ugh.
The hard part is there's like a lot of the Primarchs were like, yeah, we know about it, but we just kind of like, we didn't agree. The Emperor said, hey guys, don't talk about this anymore. And Magnus, Sanguinius, Guilliman, several others, probably Russ had quite a few things to do with the eradication of those other legions. And they're like, yeah, it is what it is. I mean, considering the Emperor was willing to lose an additional 9 of his legions just to keep the status quo. Yeah.
Yep.
He's not a good guy.
I mean, I'm basically assuming that Russ was the one doing the beheading of the other 2 legions.
Probably as much as he could, yeah.
Because, like, his assault on Prospero, he was like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Like, let's do this.
He's a little too fond of fratricide for my own liking.
Yeah.
He really likes killing his brothers. Specifically those he is in rivalry or in competition with.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you can't be the better brother if you're dead.
Yeah, you could basically summarize the interaction where Horus tricks Russ into attacking the Thousand Sons instead of just like, because what Russ was supposed to do is just bring Magnus back to Terra, and Horus was like, dude, what if you just killed him? And Russ was like, brother, say less.
Yeah, he did not take a lot of goading to sack Prospero.
Yeah, he was like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting this whole moment for my whole life. Okay, so we have talked about the Rubricae, which are the regular Thousand Sun Space Marines, and we have talked about the Scarab Occult Terminators. Their regular frontline and their elites. Now let's talk about their meat shields.
We're talking about Zangors. Now, fun fact about the Zangors, these were actually humans at one point. They were also known as Beastmen, because you could probably guess that they don't really look that human anymore.
No.
Zangors are mutants that serve the Chaos God of Change and are hungry for arcane knowledge. These mutants tend to serve under the Thousand Sun Sorcerers in a vain attempt to gain more knowledge and power. So basically, the Thousand Suns were like, hey, I know this cool fact, and the Zangors are like, hey, because we've basically, we have a lot of warp taint going on, we would like to know more, and they basically follow the proverbial carrot.
Gene, don't say taint.
It is said that Zangors come from the mutations of crews of ships caught in warp storms. So imagine you're flying through a warp storm, your Geller field, which for those who are not familiar with Warhammer 40k, the Geller field is the force field that keeps the demons out of the ship. That is all you need to know.
Yes.
Basically, if that goes down, the humans mutate. Also, fun fact, learned this on the wiki, Zangors can be born to human mothers, specifically on worlds near the Eye of Terror.
No!
So imagine just being on a world and you're like, I'm so excited for the birth of our son. And he comes out with hooves and a beak and is chittering in the dark tongue.
So it is totally possible that Cadia had a Zangor problem.
100%. Most likely these were I'm assuming shot and killed, because
I bet the mother was too, if we're being honest. The Imperium is not lenient in any way towards sorcery.
yeah, not at all. So they were probably killed, unless they were on a world that like tolerated mutants, which then they were probably going to get visited by the Inquisition anyway. These Zangors tend to speak in the dark tongue, so when they're attacking their foes, a chanting can be heard emerging from the din. So imagine like thousands of very strong-looking humans with guns and chainswords, usually running at you, and they're talking in a different language. They are speaking the Dark Lord's tongue, and they
Black speech.
yeah, it does remind me of Black Speech from Lord of the Rings.
They're orcs, but they're not.
Yeah. These warriors tend to be beaked, brightly colored, and also strong in combat. They're imbued with chaos magic, so chaos is like, hey, we'll give you some boons, and you have to have an insatiable knowledge or thirst for knowledge now. So totally not a double-sided sword at all. These usually run as frontline infantry for the Thousand Sons. The Rubricae are mostly machines, but are really focusing on ranged. So
Correct.
Having the Zangors in close combat is really helpful because they can absorb some of the punishment and deal it out in close quarters, so the K-Sons can continue to maneuver in the backlines and put their schemes into play.
Yeah, so your Zangors on the tabletop are going to be the units that you use to basically put on objectives for as cheap as possible. You're gonna like they need to be cheap so that like you can use the rest of your army to do the killing, while these guys basically sit on an objective and do nothing.
Yes, 100%.
Well, and score you points. Scoring points is not nothing. That's how you win. I wouldn't know because I don't win very often, but self-burn. Also, you in the Space Marine 2, you can actually see some of the cultist or the cultist guardsmen or the chaos guardsmen turn into Zangors. They like start wiggling around and they start, being all dusty, and they turn into a Zangor, and that is Tzeentch possessing them and changing their form to make them his soldiers.
Yeah.
Upgrades, people. Upgrades! Just a reminder to the people in our chat, the question of the day is, what is your favorite Warhammer trope or stereotype? And we will shout it out on the podcast.
As long as they're not too not safe for work.
Yeah, so maybe keep the Eldar stuff and the Dark Eldar stuff down to a minimum. We'll try to bleep it as best we can. Because this has to go on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, like, keep the Emperor's Children stuff to yourself, but,
I was like, I don't think any of our podcasts actually have the restricted tag. If we did an Emperor's Children episode, that would be the first one.
Yeah, that's going to get real nasty real quick, especially since the Emperor's Children essentially descended into chaos in some sort of weird art blood orgy. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Who knew people could go so crazy?
We should move on. Can I read the part about Hellbrutes?
I wrote it for you.
Yay! We're going to move on to Hellbrutes. So we've talked about the little boys, we've talked about the medium boys, and the slightly larger boys. Now we're going to talk about the Hellbrutes. Out of all the members of the Thousand Sons that got a special Tzeentchian glow-up, the vehicles, not so much. Basically, you just paint the armor panels of any Chaos vehicle, K-Suns blue, and boom, it's Thousand Sons. They don't really have unique Thousand Sons vehicles for this Legion. I'm really sorry. However, the Hellbrutes. These mechanical monstrosities are the twisted version of the Space Marine Dreadnought. I believe the first Hellbrutes came into being when the Chaos Legions turned, and their dreadnoughts were infected with the scrap code from the Dark Mechanicum. They basically got, which is like, imagine if a demon was in a line of code. That's what that was, and it like mutated a bunch of their machines. That's where you see things like I think it's like the Venom Crawlers, the Hellbrutes. It's like a big muscly machine that's really gross. Yeah. The Obliterators, those are weird.
The Defilers too.
Defilers, yeah, that's a good one. The weird spider looking thing, crab spider thing.
That's a special treat from the Word Bearers. So,
ooh, real quick, and Combrew says over in the chat, and since K-Suns are all dust, their hull brutes are made from Space Marines stolen from other legions. That's a good note. I did not know that.
yes, most of the vehicles obtained by the Thousand Sons are actually usually stolen from other legions because
That makes so much sense.
they don't tend to at least according to the wiki, is that they don't tend to maintain their vehicles super well, and they're not like actively seeking out like parts and stuff because they're literally so consumed with seeking knowledge that whatever they get and in terms of like heavy hardware is just what they get.
It's just on loan from another legion.
Yeah, essentially.
On loan. It's 100% stolen. The Chaos Legions do not get along well. It's why
Hellbrutes are definitely very, very Cornish in nature, as you will find out as Andrew continues to read.
Indeed. One key thing to note is that these most commonly come from the Horus Heresy pattern Contemptor Dreadnought, which, if you try to play these in 40k, I believe that's in the Legends data sheets, is the Contemptor Dreadnought, due to most of the demonic infusions happening when the Traitor Legions embraced Chaos. In Space Marine 2, you see an interaction with a Redemptor Dreadnought, good guys, and one of the
smaller cousins. One of those. That's supposed to be a those. One of,
that was the funniest. That was the funniest typo I've ever seen. And one of their smaller chaos cousins, the Hellbrutes. It did not go well for the Brute. The Redemptor pattern dreadnoughts are easily twice the size of the regular Hellbrutes. They're so cute compared to the size of the Redemptor dreadnought. As far as the I used to have a dreadnought, and next to the Redemptor pattern dreadnought, I do have all three. It just looks like a little baby.
You do have a Contemptor, Redemptor, and Ballistus.
Brutalis, Redemptor, Ballistus.
Nice.
The Contemptor I do not have because it's Legends and I don't want to play it. And I've kind of paused buying Space Marine stuff because the Space Marines are not good. And I ran Dark Angels, and Dark Angels aren't really that good anymore. I'm like, crap. I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah.
So unless they revamp a different chapter, then I'll get back into building my Space Marines.
Right.
Due to the effects of entombment into the sarcophagus, most Chaos Marines that find their resting place here become tortured souls. They are cut off from the glory of battle in the case of the K-Suns, the pursuit of knowledge, and the divine will of Tzeentch. All they know is fury from the solitary confinement that is their warp-wrecked adamantium shell. That makes these units formidable on the battlefield because they're so freaking angry. The fury that they are trapped with comes out as psychotic rage on the battlefield. Off the battlefield, the battle rage is so severe that the sarcophagus has to be disconnected from the warrior shell, lest the Hellbrute gain access to its weapons while in transit and go on a killing rage. As far as I'm aware, this is almost a problem with loyalist Marines too. They have to put their dreadnoughts in like a coma, like an induced coma almost, so that they don't just go bananas, because this drives anyone crazy. They're like, oh, that's weird. That's it's probably because of all that chaos, right? And meanwhile, on the loyalist ships, they're like, ah! just going bananas because they can't. They just are in a dark sensory deprivation chamber and sometimes are given a gun.
Yep.
These machines can be equipped with a standard multi-melta and power fist, both relatively short-range weapons, or pursue a ranged armament as well. You can take dueling power fists, dope, but also twin-linked heavy bolters, a Reaper autocannon, and plasma cannon, twin-linked las cannon, all in exchange for the multi-melta. In Space Marine 2, I think the only other option we see is the plasma cannon.
Correct.
The original Power Fist can be swapped for a Combi Bolter, Heavy Flamer, Thunder Hammer, Power Scourge, or Missile Launcher. I believe we see the Thunder Hammer in Space Marine 2. I think we see an Ultramarine get absolutely bodied by the Thunderhammer during the last stand, where the Lord of Macragge, what's his face? Calgar, thank you. I couldn't remember his name. Descends upon the battlefield like an angel of wrath, and that was so cool. I'm so sorry if that spoils. That's a spoiler. Abort. Yeah, super cool moment. Absolutely destroys one of the Hellbrutes who is charging your position, who definitely... You see an Ultramarine run at this Hellbrute who's got a Thunderhammer equipped, and he's wearing a helmet. He has no significant markings, and you're like, he's dead. He is not a main character. Oh,
you might
he's
as well
dead.
be wearing a red t-shirt, friend. Yeah, you are gone.
Might as well be wearing a red uniform and just gets bodied. But then the Hellbrute gets absolutely annihilated by the Thunderbird's rocket pods. Calgar comes in and literally sweeps you off your feet. It's amazing. Due to the fact that Tzeentch and the Thousand Sons tend to run mostly ranged units, this Hellbrute can fit any type of situation. Needs more support for your Zangors or greater demons up front? Run a melee configuration. Need more heavy fire or some Imperial Guard heavy armor? Run a missile launcher and twin-linked plasma cannon.
Yeah, man, if you got tanks you got to take out, you got to bring the big boys.
The Dreadnoughts do it all.
Interesting thing is, if you look up the Hellbrute and you're on the warhammer40k.fandom.com wiki, the Hellbrute in the Thousand Sons configuration is actually shown holding a missile launcher and twin-linked las cannon.
Cool.
So they're like, hey, you should run this as a ranged weapon because this is what they do. So
this is a ranged army.
Absolutely. Then we get into a fun unit. Now we get to see a Lord of Change in Space Marine 2. However, this is not Kairos Fate Weaver, is my understanding. Unless you know otherwise. But from my understanding is that the Lord of Change that we see in Space Marine 2 is not the Lord, like the greater demon of Tzeentch, which is Kairos Fate Reaver, who's a named character and is the head demon, essentially, of Tzeentch.
Correct.
Some fun excerpts from the datasheet. Greater demons of Tzeentch are infinitely cunning sorcerers and manipulators. Their malevolent gaze lays bare the souls of their victim and blasts the sanity of even the staunchest mortal, while their enscrolled weapons and unholy magics violently reshape reality itself into ever-mutating forms. The text we get from Kairos Fate Weaver. Wielding the Warpforged Staff of Tomorrow, and with the ability to predict all that may come to pass, while knowing all that has already transpired, Kairos Fate Weaver is among the galaxy's most canny strategists. What the demon lacks in physical and martial prowess it more than makes up for the pure Tzeentchian cunning. And there's actually a reason that Kairos Fate Weaver is not as strictly lethal than the regular Lord of Change. And there's a little reason for that I found out while writing this episode. So we'll get into that here in just a minute. So specifically, we're going to talk about Kairos Fate Weaver. Fate Weaver is the mightiest of demons under Tzeentch. He has access to all of the knowledge of Tzeentch concerning the Fates. So Fates being everything that has been known in the past and every strand of the future. However, he cannot know the present. As with any drawback from chaos, any boon from chaos, it has a double-edged sword, essentially. So he is constantly... you could essentially say he's not really living in the present. He's constantly spouting off what's happening in the future. So that's why it makes him a good strategist, because he knows what's going to happen. But keep in mind, knowing the future is no simple task. The future runs in threads in this universe. To know the future is to know all of the different threads the future can have and simultaneously hold them all and understand each one like all at the same time. This is similar to how the Eldar foresee and keep the future of the Eldar alive. They essentially see the strands of fate and they follow the strands as they continue to benefit the Eldar race. Kairos has had the delight to himself be cast into the Well of Eternity. This is actually where we get the lack of lethality in Kairos. So essentially what happened was Tzeentch found the Well of Eternity, which was this place where like time, reality, and space, basically everything came together, and was known to be a source of immense power and knowledge. So Tzeentch was like, hey, I really like this. However, Tzeentch was actually scared of getting in the well, is what the wiki says. So imagine a chaos deity scared of doing something. That is how dangerous the well is. So if you've got a bunch of Lords of Change sitting around and you want to test the waters a little bit, well, what do? You start casting your own lords into the well. So he kills a ton of his lords this way because none of them are surviving. So he starts to get a little desperate. He's like, hey, I've kind of thrown a lot of you in the well already. I need one of you to survive. So he takes his head Lord of Change, Kairos Fateweaver, hucks him into the well, and he survives. However, he emerges aged and haggard from his journey. It's said that his once majestic wings were almost completely laid bare and looked torn and tattered from getting out. However, he gains all of this knowledge. During the process, Kairos Fateweaver actually gains a second head and is now stooped in appearance. So he loses some of his martial ability for the knowledge that he gains. The journey to the well gives him his second head, and if you guys don't know, one head always speaks the truth, and the other always speaks lies, giving a confounding answer to whoever hears. So basically what happened is one of them gives lies because they're so filled with knowledge that one of his heads goes insane. So it is essentially always giving a contradictory answer. The problem is that you don't know which one is telling the truth and which one's lying to you. So if one says, so if you were to look at Andrew and I, and you were to say one twin always tells the truth and one of us always tells lies, which one do you believe? Right? So it gets pretty confusing pretty quick, which is why he like messes with people really, really easily. There's also like a lot of lore on Kairos Fateweaver in the wikis, and it is extensive.
Yeah.
Like way too wild to go into today because we are actually at our hour mark. So that is actually where we're going to finish it today. So thank you guys so much. Andrew, do we plan on doing some more streaming?
Let's see. Our stream dates this week are going to be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So make sure you guys have notifications turned on. Follow the stream so you can catch us when we go live. We're going to be playing... what are you planning on playing this week?
I kind of want to do some more StarCraft because I just got a new commander for the co-op. I've been playing through Han and Horner. Super, super fun. But I'm also still working on getting some Skyrim achievements, so I kind of want to do that. There's still Space Marine that I want to play. However, every time I try to jump in Eternal War, for some reason, it doesn't matchmake me into a lobby, and I haven't figured out why that is yet. So, still trying to figure that out, because I was like, I kind of want to do that, because that would be fun to explore and see how bad I am at. But eventually I will need to fully complete Space Marine 2, so there's that as well. But I've been kind of just playing through different games. But I also might start playing Fallout 4 and keep that as a stream exclusive 100% playthrough.
That'll be pretty sweet. For me, I'm probably going to either be playing Star Wars Outlaws, Helldivers, or Space Marine 2.
Very nice. All right, guys. Thank you guys, everyone, for watching. Every single one of you watching is amazing, lovely, and probably has some pretty cool models out there. So if you're a 40K fan, leave us some theories in the comments, share some pictures of your models on Twitter or Instagram, or shoot us an email at talkabouttatooine@gmail.com if you have questions you want featured on air. And sometimes we do live episodes, so you guys can ask live questions as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Guys, we need you guys to do that. Like the video and comment. By interacting with the video, more people see it, it gets pushed out. Even if you're like, hey, these guys are kind of weird, they look the same, that is a helpful comment because it pushes it out to more people. It is true.
Twins are weird.
The algorithmic overlords are not always doing us any favors, but you guys can definitely help that out. So until next time, everybody, does the Emperor protect? No.
No, he
Tzeentch
doesn't.
protects.